accidental that people come together, and it wasn't accidental that I met Mark Victor Hansen.
Yes.
It wasn't accidental. I mean, Mark Victor Hansen and I went to the same church in Huntington Beach, California at about the same time. He was a teenager, and I was in my early 20s, and we went to the same little teeny church in Huntington Beach, California, and we both grew in separate ways into the same sort of ideas. And it's an interesting synchronicity that happened. And synchronicity sort of means almost everything that you need to know comes to you, and you learn what you need to know when you need to know it. And I think that's part of the path that you have to take, even when there are things you need to learn about people who aren't being as honest as they should be or as direct as they should be. I think you need to, sometimes we need to learn things like forgiveness.
Yes.
And sometimes people have to be mean to us before we can forgive them, so that's the best way to get there, I think. But it's also just one of the paths that you go down, and I think that even when you get on the wrong path, sometimes you trip and get back on the right path as well. So
I was influenced by an organization which was Many Paths to God. So it just gently reminded me of that. You know, we're all on many paths to God, heading in the same direction.
Well, I believe God gives everyone, I think I say that in the book someplace, God gives everyone ideas, and some people take the ideas and make them into something, and sometimes two or three or four people will take the same idea that's been given to them by God, and they go in 4 different directions.
Yes.
And they still, I mean, if somebody had the same plot for a story and they were to write it, if they were good authors, they would write it and it would become 4 different stories. A plot is nothing more than a structure that you fit your story into.
Well, you know, this takes us on another path.
Oh, okay.
Your talk about structuring and writing. You teach.
Yes.
You elaborate a little bit about that.
I accidentally met someone online.
Accidentally?
Yeah, one of those
it wasn't a wish?
accidental synchronicities, I think.
Okay.
I met someone online who said, you have a lot of good ideas about creating characters. Why don't you teach it? And I said, well, I never thought about it, but I'll see what I can come up with. And the next thing you know, I'm a writing instructor on thewriterscollege.com, and I teach creating characters. And I got some of it from acting, because as I did a little acting. I just had horrible stage fright at the time. But the thing that I remembered is you were supposed to get into the head of the character. And I thought, why wouldn't that work with writing characters? And so the way I teach it and the way I do my characterization is I take my head off and set it on a shelf and put the character's head on, and then I write a backstory in first person about...
Would you please repeat that again? You take your head off.
Well,
and
it's
you put it
sort
on
of
the shelf.
imaginary.
Okay.
But I take my head off and I put the character's head on, I become the character. And then I tell the backstory on paper of the character. I say, okay, this person, I am so-and-so, and I did this, and the reason I don't like that guy is because, and so you do that with all of your characters, and pretty soon you can see why your characters are not, why they have conflict. And that's where your story starts, is where you find that they don't agree, where their conflict begins, and that's where your story begins. And so I teach that. It's 6 lessons that, it's pretty much one-on-one. The people send me, I send them their lessons, and they send me.
What do you mean? Is this done online?
It's done online.
Oh.
Yes, and they send me their homework, and sometimes I get homework and they're very, very good. And when they're very, very good, I give them more homework to do. because I can see that they can grow from it. And I've had some very talented people.
Like, to name one that would be probably, oh, you can't?
I can't name any because they only have their screen names.
Okay, but
so I don't know them that well.
Most interesting that you would say that would be creative.
There have been a couple that were very, very creative, and I could see them becoming bestsellers. They're so good. But they claim that what I taught them helped them to get as good as they are, so that's good. I love that part. That's a good part of teaching. So do you teach also in your experiences with the self-publishing? Because the Wish Factory was self-published. Yeah, I did write, my friend Carl Largent, who just passed away last week, wrote or compiled a book. I think it's called How the Pros Do It. And among other things, it has articles about all the different genre, and it has an article that I wrote about self-publishing in it. And in there I tell people I don't advise it because it's very, very hard, and you can make a lot of mistakes and they can be costly. But at the same time, it's an adventure, and everybody should have their adventures. Yes. One thing I wanted to share with everyone out there that attracted me to this book was throughout the book, it wasn't necessary, yet you chose to, because I'm sure in your direction, you quoted some parts of the Bible. And one that stays in my soul and everything that I do is, with God all things are possible. I think that I knew that before I read it in the Bible. Yeah. I think that's something you just know. I can remember as a child, when you're frightened, when you're as a child, I can remember saying, God is with me all the time. And that got me through a lot of fears, and I'm not certain where I first heard with God all things are possible, probably from school or from Sunday school or church, because I've gone to church, different churches from the time I was 4 or 5 years old. I can remember. I'm sure I was there before that, just don't remember. Well, it has such a strong spiritual, well, it's true. Sense to it. And and you know, where you said at the top, it looks like a children's book. Did I say this at the beginning at first glance? But don't be put off by the storyline. Part 1 is a simple story that tells how to make wishes come true and to see prayers answered, followed by, except ye be converted and become like little children, you shall not enter the kingdom of heaven. Would you elaborate on that a little bit more? About you've known me for a while. Yeah. And you know that I'm not really, if I have one fear, it's that people are going to discover I'm not really a grown-up. Jana, I reflect you. I just have always thought like a child, and I think that thinking as a child is probably easier because you're not thinking logically, you're not thinking with all of the learned negativities that come around, and you're just thinking about what you know, and when you know that with God all things are possible, you don't worry about the rest of it. That's right. I call them divinities. Yeah. The divine in each and every one. Yes, that's the other thing that is hard to acquire, and that is that you run into people who are just not easy to get along with, and you have to tell yourself, God's in there somewhere. And you keep looking for it, and you forgive them because God's in there somewhere. But they don't make it easier a lot of the time, so it's hard. But at the same time, that's a good thing to keep yourself centered, is to know that with God all things are possible, and that God is within every atom there is in the world, and that the universe itself is an atom. I mean, it's a big expanded atom, and it looks like one. It looks like an atom, and we're made up of lots of atoms, and they're all connected. They're all connected with one another.